Hello and welcome to another segment of Western Wisconsin Journal. I'm Jamie Johnson, the legal and government correspondent, and my guest today is a recent appointment of Governor Scott Walker. I'm welcoming to the show Mike Waterman. Mike, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
And Mike, you've been appointed to be the new St. Croix County Judge, is that right?
That's correct, yes.
So the purpose of today's meeting, you haven't actually taken your position yet, correct?
That's right.
When does that start?
The position begins May 20th,
Okay.
and then they'll send me out to some education. I'll do some mentoring out of county, and then I'll come back to St. Croix County probably June 8, and then start a calendar at that time.
Okay. So I guess what we'd like to do today is get to know you a little bit better and find out what it was like to go through the selection process. I've had some experience when I've served on the Judicial Advisory Selection Council, and I know that it might look different when you're the actual candidate. So first of all, you are actually taking the spot of Howard Cameron, is that right?
That's correct, yes.
And Howard was elected, I want to say, about 7 years ago, something like that?
I believe it was 2008. He was elected to an open seat. St. Croix County has 4 branches of circuit court judge, and branch 4 was newly created in 2008, and Judge Cameron ran for that position and was elected. He served one 6-year term, was reelected in 2013, and then retired shortly after, reelected in 2014, and then he retired shortly after February of 2015.
And yeah, he made his final day sometime, I think it was in March. And meanwhile, there was some heads up so folks could apply. Well, we'll get into that process, but a little bit more about you, your background. I know that you have been a shareholder and attorney at Mudge Porter Law Firm here in Hudson for 20 years. Right. And what did you do before that?
Before that, I was in law school. What was interesting about my transition from law school into private practice was that I was had worked at a government office, the U.S. Attorney's Office in Minneapolis. And that position came to an end, and I was looking for a place to make some money, being that I was still in school. I saw a job ad for this firm in Hudson, Wisconsin. At that time, I was living in Minnesota, didn't know much about Wisconsin. But I came over for an interview and just fell in love with the community. The river, it was a beautiful day. I was walking up and down 2nd Street. I met with Bob Mudge, who a lot of people probably remember, and we just seemed to hit it off. And I started up as a law clerk, and then I stayed on as the associate attorney after that. That was 20 years ago,
well, let's hear a little bit about your background. You grew up where then?
Well, I was born in New Jersey.
Okay.
And I spent my first 15 years there. I lived in a small town called Pennington. It's a lot like Hudson, if you can believe that. And then my father took a job transfer in 1986, and then we moved to Minnesota. I finished up my high school there, went to Pennsylvania for college, returned back to Minnesota for law school, and then I moved to Wisconsin when I got my job here.
So, not quite half your life in Wisconsin, but between New Jersey, Pennsylvania, no Eastern accent.
Well, thank you.
But, okay, so, and your family?
Yes, my wife is Deborah. Actually, we met in college, and then when I was accepted to law school, she moved out here with me. And my son is Chris. He's 26, and he's doing computer work for a company called Gradient Financial in the Twin Cities.
Okay. And you actually lived in North Hudson for the first part of your time here?
I did, 12 years in North Hudson.
Okay.
Yes.
You didn't live too far from us. We were like about a block apart.
Yes, that's true, yep.
And I think I moved first, and then you moved. Now you live in the New Richmond area?
Right, Somerset Township. My wife and I moved there in 2009, 2010, roughly 5 years ago, and we just wanted to try something different, a little bit quieter, a little bit of land, and we just found a house that seemed to fit with where we were in life, and we'd love it out there.
So we currently have 3 judges from the New Richmond area, 1 from River Falls, and nobody from Hudson.
Well, that's sometimes the way it works.
Yeah. So, okay. So you had said Pennsylvania for college and law school at Hamlin, and you graduated with honors from both places, is that right?
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
And then you had some experience working, you said, at the U.S. Attorney's Office. Another part of your legal career has been adjunct professor of law. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I started at William Mitchell College of Law in 1997. I was 2 years out of law school at that point, so I was very young. And William Mitchell does a lot with adjunct professors. An adjunct professor is a professor that comes in and teaches 1 or 2 courses, but isn't on a 10-year track to become a full-time professor. And the work interested me because it was legal writing, a lot of legal research, and those were areas that I was interested in. I felt very comfortable doing those types of things. And I thought the idea of teaching students was neat, frankly. It was something that interested me, being able to share my experience and my knowledge with people that were learning in the profession. And I've been teaching at Mitchell since 1997, so it's been nearly my entire legal career. My work originally started out in the legal research and writing, which is a first-year course, and has gradually transitioned into appellate advocacy, where we teach students how to research and write an appellate brief. So it's mainly a writing class, but we do some practical skills such as an oral argument and analysis of different legal issues and how to present a case.
And you have been involved with mock trial program that's run through the State Bar, I see.
Yes, the State Bar has a program for high school students to deliver mock trials, and this would be at trial court level. So we have 2 teams, usually from different competing high schools, that would square off in a courtroom. There's a pre-prepared set of facts and laws that the students will study and prepare, and then they'll present a trial. They'll go through examination of witnesses, cross-examination, opening statements, closing arguments.
So you've been both a judge and a youth mentor for that?
Yes. Yeah.
And then Hamlin, same thing, mock trial program, only at the law school level.
Correct.
Okay.
Right.
What are some of your other volunteer activities? You've got a list, and rather than me reading them off, why don't you tell me what you spend your time doing when you're not doing law stuff?
Well, most recently I've been very active in my Lions Club. I'm the president of the Sunrise branch of the Hudson Lions Club. Our motto is "We Serve," so we pride ourselves in public service projects, getting out into the community. We raise money for other humanitarian projects. I'm very proud of our Lions work, and I've been active in that for the past 5 years. Other volunteer activities, I like to, it's a hobby, I like to take pictures. I'm a photographer, and then I will oftentimes volunteer those skills for other nonprofits. Sometimes organizations will have events where they want a photographer, and I'll participate in that. Over the years, I've been involved in the State Bar of Wisconsin. I've been involved in our local St. Croix Bar Association free legal clinic. That's a clinic that's held once a month up at the government center. And we meet with individuals who have legal problems, and it's free to the public. Anybody can come in and for 15 or 20 minutes meet with a lawyer and have questions answered.
Yeah, I think that's, isn't that the first or second Monday of every month?
I think it's the second Monday of every month.
Second Monday. And I know that's in Hudson, and then Pierce County has a similar program that meets on a monthly basis. Right. You mentioned the State Bar Association. You've been on the Board of Governors. You've been on committees. And also you've worked with the Office of Lawyer Regulation. You were actually chair currently of the investigation of ethics complaints against other lawyers. Is that right?
That's right. Anytime there's a complaint of the ethics or the propriety of some actions by an attorney, complaints go to the Office of Lawyer Regulation. It's a division of the Supreme Court of Wisconsin. And when complaints that come in, complaints come into that office, they're evaluated, and if there is merit to the complaint, it is often referred to an investigation committee, such as ours in District 8. And that investigation committee then will go out and interview the witnesses, collect facts and information, and then conduct a hearing where the complainant and the attorney can both respond in person to the allegations. We make certain findings and then disciplinary recommendations to the Office of Lawyer Regulation. And then we'll pass that file back to the office, and then they'll pick it up from there. Oftentimes the disciplinary or the discipline imposed by the office will be, could be anything from a consent decree where the attorneys will agree to certain discipline. Sometimes it's challenged and it actually goes to court, may even reach the Supreme Court. But the investigation committee is vital because we're the front line, and we have to gather all of the facts and all of the information that is later used in the
And
proceeding.
I should point out that committee is not just all lawyers. There's non-lawyers on that as well.
Correct. The Supreme Court tries to balance it out between lawyers and non-lawyers. And frankly, the non-lawyers are vital to the process because they bring experiences and insight that a lot of times the lawyers don't have or oftentimes will overlook. So their participation is essential.
And this goes beyond fee disputes. Maybe somebody feels like they paid too much for their lawyer fee or whatever, or were charged too much. This is actual violations of the ethical code.
Right, and sometimes they can be fee disputes, although that's not really what our focus is. A lot of times what we see are complaints about handling of trust account money. When a lawyer receives money from someone other that's not property of the law firm, it has to go into a trust account. And a lawyer is responsible for that money, must account for that money. Unfortunately, sometimes lawyers will mishandle that money, and that's probably the biggest area of complaints that we see. Other areas can be conflicts of interest. Lawyers are bound by strict ethical rules, and one of the key ethical rules is avoiding conflicts of interest. When lawyers are on both sides of a transaction, that can be a problem, or when a lawyer takes positions that are going to adversely affect a client, that's a problem as well. Those seem to be the primary areas that we see, but the lawyers' ethical rules are vast, and sometimes the complaints we see are on a very narrow or very discrete area that we haven't seen before.
And I suppose you mentioned the punishment or the, I guess, retribution, if you will, that is handed down depends on the level of the offense and how much intention. There's some rules, I guess, that get violated unintentionally, and then that wouldn't carry as maybe as stringent. But do you see at that frontline level a lot of repeat offenders? I know usually the ones that end up having the public reprimands that the public can know about, that's not usually their first time involved in the process.
Yeah, during the term that I've been on there, we haven't seen repeat offenders. We've seen people, I mean, I haven't seen somebody that was before us and then came back in a subsequent year. We have seen people that have been in ethical trouble before, maybe years prior to our committee's work. The committee members turn over.
Okay.
You know, roughly, we serve 3-year terms. You can serve 3 consecutive 3-year terms. But there are some repeat offenders, unfortunately, and usually the discipline is an escalating discipline, so that you know, if an offender has a relatively minor violation and is a first-time violator, the discipline is equal to that or in proportion to that. But the more serious violations are dealt with more harshly, so are the repeat offenders.
So, pretty strong history of not just service in the profession, but also out in the community as far as your preparation. Now, the $64,000 question, why did you want to be a judge? Why did you apply for this position?
I wanted to apply for the position out of a sense of public service. Public service is something that's important to me. And when I was younger, I was told by my parents, go out and get a good education, do good in school. And as I got older, I learned that you have to go out and do good in a job, get a job that is meaningful and that is fulfilling. But there's another part to that, and that's public service. And I think that everybody in our society benefits in some way from the work of others in our society. And I think it's important that we all contribute back to society in some form of public service. And people do it in a variety of different ways. There are police officers that do incredibly good work, teachers, community volunteers. For a lawyer, I don't think there's any higher or better way to do public service and to give back to the public than as a judge. And when Judge Cameron retired, I did a self-assessment of where I was in life and where I was in my career. And I had a long conversation with my wife that night, and I said, geez, honey, this may not come again anytime soon. And it was at a point in my life where I felt that this would be a great time to step into public service because I'm 45 years old and I'm still relatively young. So I've got the energy and the desire to go out and work hard and do a good job and put in the time and the hours. Yet I have 20 years of legal experience with me that I can offer to the public and hopefully contribute in a positive way.
Okay, so what was that like? You said it was announced that there would be this opening. I know that the application process can be pretty onerous. There's a lot of stuff that you need to put together. Can you give us some examples of things that you needed to do?
Sure. Well, the governor invites applications, and it's applying for a job just like any other job. You fill out a written application, and the information is stuff that you would expect, your name and your address and where you went to school and where you've lived. But then there are also a lot of questions that were very detailed and specific about your area of practice of law. I was asked how many bench trials I've had, meaning trials to a judge, how many jury trials I've had, how many were arbitrary.
What were your answers to those?
I don't remember right now, but I tell you this though, when I was thinking through what my answers would be, I kind of had a mental estimate on how many trials. And then one weekend, all I did was went back through all of my records, all of the computer files that are available online, and started counting them up, and I was way off. I was not even close. And I found out that I had tried a lot more cases than I thought I did. So I was pleasantly surprised about that, but a lot of those cases I tend to have forgotten. They've just been
Right.
a long time ago. But the application also asked some essay questions, questions about what our philosophy might be if we were to be on the bench, how would we approach situations, why we want to be a judge, things like that. We were also asked to submit writing samples. So I submitted an appellate brief and a trial court brief that I recently worked on. The application asked for some professional references. So I identified some judges that I regularly appear in front of. And then it also asked for written letters of recommendation. So I went out to colleagues of mine, other attorneys, a client, even one of my former legal assistants, and asked them to submit a letter of recommendation on my behalf.
Okay. How many letters did you have?
I think I had about eight or nine.
And did they give you any minimum or maximum number?
No, and I asked some different people that went through the process, what's a good number? Because it's not a popularity contest, and I don't want to inundate the committee with 30 or 40 letters. So I tried to be selective and get a cross-section of different people that I've encountered in my life. And some people that I've talked to had 3 or 4, others had 25 or 30, so I think I was probably somewhere in between.
And what did you say when it came to judicial philosophy? Obviously, you're not going to be asked how would you rule in this specific instance, but general philosophy, how did you respond to that question?
Well, I remembered back in, I think it was 2005 or 2004, when Chief Justice Roberts was going through his confirmation process. And he drew the analogy that a judge is a lot like a baseball umpire. The umpire is there to call balls and strikes, not to pitch and bat. And I think that's the way that I would approach judging, that a judge isn't there to make up the law, to create the law. The judge also isn't there to be an advocate for one side or the other. The judge is there to decide cases. And that's the philosophy that I'm going to carry forward.
Now, stepping into this position, do you see any major revisions that need to be done to our judiciary here, or how we do things in the justice system, whether it's the civil or the criminal side?
No, I think we're very fortunate in St. Croix County that the bench has been exceptionally high. We've got some very talented judges that do remarkable work. We've also have a lot of talented support staff. The clerk of court's office, I think, does an exceptional job. The sheriff's department does great work. The prosecutor's office, the public defender, it really is a great system. And I can say this not just because I'm now coming to the bench in this county, but I've said that throughout my career. I've had the opportunity to practice all across this state. I've practiced in Minnesota. I've practiced in the federal benches or the federal courts as well. So I've seen a lot of courts, I've seen a lot of systems, and I've seen a lot of dysfunction. We're very fortunate that St. Croix doesn't have that dysfunction. The system works very, very well.
Now, every judge has, some legal career prior to taking the bench. Some never leave public sector, and they go transition like straight from a DA's office or a public defender's office and take the bench. Others come from the private sector, but there's very few jack-of-all-trade attorneys anymore. Everyone has more of an area. Why don't you tell our audience, what is the areas of law that you had the most experience in?
I've had the most experience in civil litigation, trying cases when people are sued for some wrong. It could be a car accident, it could be a business dispute, it could be a contract dispute. that's where my focus has been, certainly in the past several years. When I first started out as a lawyer 20 years ago, my firm encouraged me to try different things, and they would expose me to different projects. So I was exposed to criminal defense. I was exposed to family law. I was exposed to paternity and small claims. So I've seen it all, and I'm familiar with it to a certain degree. Like you say, you can't be expert in everything. And I would like to consider myself most comfortable in the civil litigation area, but family law, criminal law, those aren't alien topics to me. And I think that with some study and some practice, I'll be up to speed pretty quickly.
Yes. And we have court commissioners that handle the small claims and the family law, a lot of that, but it's still need for judges to make rulings in those areas.
Absolutely.
So when do you get to start calling the balls and strikes, as you put it?
Well, opening day in St. Croix County for Mike Waterman will be June 8. That's when I'll take my own calendar. Before that, there'll be some judicial education. There's a criminal law sentencing seminar, May 12, 13, 14, or actually 13, 14, 15, that I will attend.
Now you have to be sworn in before you go to that training.
No, that just happened to be on the calendar, so it's just fortuitous that that's there and I'm available. So I won't be sworn in as a judge. I'll just be attending as a private citizen.
Okay.
Right? So I'll attend that seminar, and then I'll come back, hopefully have a couple of days off, and then May 20 appears to be the official appointment date.
Okay.
And I would anticipate I'd be sworn in on that day or sometime around that day, and then be sent out of county for mentoring. And what has been done recently is new judges will go out of county for roughly 2 weeks to experience business in other counties, to see how it's done differently in other areas. And although I've been exposed to court systems in a lot of different counties as a lawyer, I haven't seen it from behind the bench. And there is a lot of administrative work that goes on that lawyers don't necessarily see. And I think it will be very helpful to get out to different counties and see how the workings behind the bench are. So Judge Needham, who's the chief judge of the district, and I have talked, and we don't know exactly which counties I'm going to go to, but most likely it'll be a combination, maybe a big county like Eau Claire, a smaller county with a one-judge system, maybe up to Balsam Lake, which has 2 judges. Would like to have me visit with some experienced judges and also some newer judges, so I can learn how they've adapted and things that they've learned that were helpful. So after 2 weeks of that mentoring, I'll come back to St. Croix County and start my own calendar June 8.
So you have to have your legal practice all wound down by May 20th.
Yes.
And there's pretty strict rules. You can't have any further interest in your firm and so forth.
Correct, right. All my files have to be completed or passed off to other lawyers. So that's where I'm at right now, is working through that task. I also have work that's still on my calendar that I'm trying to get done too. I finished a very long appellate brief yesterday. I had a trial last week, so I still have those things I have to wrap up as well.
Great. Well, we look forward to maybe having you come back, I don't know, a year from now or so, and tell us what it was like to take the bench. Now, you do need to face a retention election, is that correct?
Correct, right. Even though this was an appointment, I won't fill out the remainder of Judge Cameron's term, so I'll have to stand for election April of 2016. And the way that I'm approaching it now is there are many high expectations for this position, and there's important work to be done. So my main focus is to learn this job, to work hard, to do a good job. And if I am satisfied that I am fulfilling expectations and I am satisfied that the public has confidence in my abilities, then it's my intention to run for that position.
So, but this position, Branch 4, was originally created for 2008 and be on 6-year cycles after that. Right. So this will now shift that, and so the next 6-year cycle would start 2016 to 2022.
Correct, right.
All right. Assuming whoever wins in that election, and if it's you're deciding to run for a re-election, but you do. You first decide to run for retention election. A re-election wouldn't really occur until 2022.
Right, I have to be elected first.
Yes.
I haven't been elected.
But you have been selected, and by a person who has some say in the matter. You don't have that appointment doesn't need to be confirmed by anyone, does it?
It doesn't. It's a governor's appointment, and in theory, the governor could appoint anybody that meets the constitutional requirements. It has to be a resident of the state and a member in good standing of the Bar of Wisconsin, a lawyer, in other words. And although there was that lengthy application process, there's a lengthy interview process in several stages. The governor doesn't have to pick anyone from that application pool. The governor can pick somebody from a different applicant pool, or the governor doesn't have to pick anybody at all. Could leave the seat open and then let it stand for election.
Now, did you actually get interviewed by the governor or just the selection committee?
A little bit of both. The selection committee, well, I can back up. After the written application is submitted, there's a 10-person judicial selection committee that reviews the applications. And they are lawyers from statewide. And in this case, they reviewed the applications. I believe they checked out references and did some vetting, and then narrowed the application pool from 7 down to 3. They didn't do any interviews, but they passed 3 of us along to what they call the second round, which is an interview with the governor's chief legal counsel, deputy legal counsel, and the chair of the judicial selection committee. And 3 of us went down to Madison for a round of interviews. The interviews were about an hour long, and they asked a variety of questions. Some of it were things about our background, our education. There were questions of me of cases that I was involved with. A lot of my appellate work resulted in published opinions. So they were reviewing those published decisions, and they had questions about those. They asked some general philosophical questions. And then they asked some hypothetical questions where they'd present a hypothetical fact situation, and they would want us to break it down and analyze, what are the issues that you see here. And then they would do a similar exercise with some case law. We would read an excerpt from a case, and we would break down the issues, and what are the points of agreement, what are the points of disagreement. So it was a very rigorous interview. It reminded me a lot of the bar exam. I left that interview just mentally drained. And then after that round of interviews, there's a personal interview with the governor himself. And as I understand it, from our applicant pool, my name was the only one that went to that interview, but I don't know if the governor was considering other applicants from different pools. But I had a 15 to 20 minute interview with the governor, and
And this was in Madison?
it was in Madison.
Okay.
My wife and I drove down the night before. It was the night of the Badgers' second round basketball game in the tournament. So we watched some basketball at night, and then went to the interview in the morning. And it was exciting because just walking up the steps to the Capitol building and then sitting in the governor's waiting area. It's an impressive building, and it really gave me time to reflect on the importance of what I was doing and the significance of the position. And then when the governor was available, he invited me into his office. He shook my hand, he poured me a glass of water, and then we complained about last night's snowfall. There was a 6-inch snowfall in Madison the night before. And then we started talking about things relevant to the application, my background, some philosophical questions, and just general questions about the law in general. And we had a very good conversation. He was very pleasant, very welcoming individual, and I didn't feel nervous. I felt very comfortable talking with him, and really enjoyed our time.
But only 15 to 20 minutes, so that was much shorter than the first interview with the other 3 gentlemen.
Right.
And then did he give you some time frame as to when to expect to hear from him?
Well, they said they're doing a background check, and he said you can expect to hear from us in about a week. That sounded fair, and I went home and I waited a week, and then a week went by, and then a second week went by, and then I was starting to get a little nervous. It's not something where you can just pick up the phone and call the governor and ask him, what's going on.
Yeah, right.
So I was just patiently waiting, and then eventually I got a call from a member of his staff who said that we'd like to schedule a telephone conference between you and the governor for tomorrow, the following day. And I thought that sounded pretty encouraging because I had a feeling the governor wasn't going to call and deliver bad news. So I waited for the phone call to come in the next day. They wanted to use my cell phone so the governor would have a way of reaching me directly.
You made sure it was charged then?
I made sure it was charged, and I made double sure it was charged. And since the governor was placing the call himself, they didn't want to be routed through the receptionist. I remember the call coming in. I answered the call on my cell phone. I heard the governor's voice, and then all of a sudden the call dropped. For some reason, I lost service, and I got this dreaded beep, beep, beep in my ear. And then I was really sweating because, I didn't know how this was going to be perceived. If the governor thought I hung up on him, or if there's something wrong with my phone and he wouldn't be able to get back in touch with me. And then I debated, well, should I call him? And then I was thinking, well, he might be trying to call me, and then it's going to be busy. So I just patiently waited, and then sure enough, he did call back. But I was afraid he was going to say, the heck with this Waterman guy, let's go to the next guy on the list.
Well, it must have felt like an eternity before that call finally, the second one came through.
It did. But it did come through, and we had a nice talk, and the governor expressed his confidence in my abilities, and I thanked him for that and accepted the position. And he said, you'll be hearing from my staff, and we'll get the ball rolling on a press release. And that came out the following day.
Great. Well, I think that gives us a great insight as to what the experience was like to go through, and helps us get to know you a little bit better. I want to thank you for your time, and like I said, we'll have an invitation for about a year from now, if that's all right with you.
Sounds great. Pleasure to be here.
Yep.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Jamie.
Mike. And thank you for joining us for another segment of Western Wisconsin Journal.